Good evening, good morrow, and good morning, everyone. Hope you are well today. I am excited, as always full of too much energy on this channel, like I've had as much coffee as I've probably had, to be talking to you about one of my favorite subjects, and that's both magic and Freemasonry. And to join me in this conversation, I am delighted and pleased to have the one and only SolMagick. Welcome, Sol. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well, brother. I'm doing well. I'm glad to be here. Thanks for the invite, and I look forward to the topic at hand.
Oh, it's one that I'm like, all right, we gotta get some words out because if there's anything that we can do, hopefully it's educate. But we want to start this conversation with some prefaces, right? Each one of us are individuals. We speak for ourselves. These what we talk about is coming from our experience. We don't speak on behalf of any grand lodge, of any jurisdiction. We're just friends having a conversation.
Yes, sir. Just a conversation.
That's right. That's absolutely right. So what we're talking about today is magic and Freemasonry, but not just the two, how within Freemasonry, magic is ever present, or at least that's my opinion. And I'd like to help paint a story or paint a picture that we can help you see the magic in the craft. If you're a brother master mason, you will know that there are experiences that are rooted in our ritual, that are rooted in the way that we engage with each other, that are all focused on being a good man. And the question is why? And why does it work? Why does how we gather and how we move together move us the way it does and achieve such fraternity, such positive charity throughout our space? So, Brother Soul, I want to start with a question. Do you believe there's magic in Freemasonry?
Absolutely, absolutely. Um, I was before we got together because there's so many definitions of what magic is, and I hate to try to reduce something as grand as magic into words, but I remember my first experience as a kid. So I'll leave it like that. Being able to make something happen or influence something in some kind of way. And you don't really have a reason for why it happened. Science can't really explain it. And you can oftentimes repeat the results. So it's a science in a way. So whether or not if I believe that magic is a part of Freemasonry, um, I believe magic is a part of everything. And I don't want to be broad and I don't want to leave any open gaps. But when I think of magic, I try to think of like a central point of reference. And for me, it's Hermes, often called Thoth. I'm wondering, what about you? When you think of magic, when you try to get to, I guess, if there is an origin, what comes to mind for you?
I think because that's I really struggle with that question. And I've even done multiple podcasts trying to encapsulate what I think magic is or how best to describe it. But I would say that I believe that magic is the intelligent connections between other intelligent things that are part of this grander scale of just continuing systems of like intelligence. I always base it towards intelligence, and that's never. I don't like the word intelligent design because oftentimes it can connect into some theologies that I don't really believe.
Right.
But when I say intelligent design, to think that everything is intended and built with purpose, built intentionally. When I think of magic, that's the code. That is the will that keeps, that basically connects those points of intelligence. It connects my mind to my heart. It connects, all of the systems that I am together. And so with magic, I always felt like I never could grab it because I was never like I was always a part of it. There was never this like I couldn't create magic. Magic could just move through me.
Yes, yes, exactly.
And
That's
with for Freemasonry, that became like you it's moving. When my like the going through those degrees, going through that place, it moved me. So I mean, so did being in church as a kid, hearing praise raised and that vibrational energy lift. There are all of these moments in life where I was moved, and I interpreted those moments to be magic.
yeah,
At least to be that connection with it.
yeah. I think oftentimes magic itself is veiled by a lot of different, like when you mention the church, magic
Mhm.
is the church. I think we talked about this before, that I don't believe that there's an organized group of people, be it church, be it the urban league, be it the Boy Scouts, be it whatever group of people. I don't think magic doesn't exist.
Mhm.
And I kind of stated that in a negative. So to say it positively, wherever people gather, there's magic there. So that's why we can kind of distill it in a sense and see how these groups have their commonalities. But I think magic is also it's kind of enshrined in a way. It's kind of coded in Freemasonry, I believe. And it's not anything that is secret. I would say that it's just that is information that some of our brethren may not put their attention on.
So let's look at that in particular, because I think that's one of the spaces where, and I've actually I've written and done exchanged some letters with different Masons across the country, and I always take it into some pagan or witchcraft or magical aspect, because it's a very uncomfortable thing for most Freemasons to talk about, because we use Christian analogy and Christian allegory, and oftentimes in that Christian allegory there is an initial presumption on magic or witchcraft, is what I was like, in particular witchcraft as it's written in English translated, and not witchcraft. It's so hard because there are so many different layers of translation,
Yes.
that when you're speaking about the Bible, when you say it says this, the Bible says a lot of things depending on who said what, but oftentimes you can say, as the Christians are not as comfortable with the concept of magic, and so you have to have a conversation to get to the idea. It's like, no, I'm not talking about this invocation or evocation of demonic energies in this malicious and malintent way. It's moving. It's like the systems which created your phone or the technologies behind it.
Yeah.
Magic is, it's technology, in my opinion. And so when you look at the magic of the craft, if you were looking at an individual brother, how would you start that conversation? How would you maybe buffer that? Or likewise, where would you start?
Well, I wouldn't buffer it. However that conversation will unfold, I will go straight into it. The reason being is that I think that there's a lot of things that people in the fraternity and out of the fraternity don't necessarily know. And while I can definitely forgive the people who aren't in the fraternity, of course I can forgive the people inside of in our fraternity, but oftentimes we get stuck in this idea of what Freemasonry is. Like for me, traditionally, it's a lot of fish fries. It's a lot of ticket
You
raffle.
got green beans, you got
Yeah, a lot of march of dimes, a lot of hospital support, a lot of community work, which
mhm.
is um, honestly not really the sole reason I joined. I was intrigued by Freemasonry because when we did our last talk, I kind of did the timelines of how when I entered magic and then versus when I entered Freemasonry. When I
Right.
entered Freemasonry, I was already 5, maybe 6 years in as a practicing magician. So
Mhm.
as a magician, I thought I want to see what these Freemasons are about, and it turned out to be church.
It's I love that particular description with it, because that I it's like I've there, and a lot of brethren kind of I call it like this, like an intangible joy. We
Mhm.
sit and we talk about business. It's sometimes it's the most boring, mundane
Yeah.
shit in the world, but it is church. The amount of times of getting to have that fraternity, that community, that engagement,
Mhm.
I come back and I always feel a bit restored. And why do you think that is? Right. So let's talk about magic.
Mhm.
Something that is occurring consistently, almost repeatably. What do you believe leads to or lends into the magic, the experience to this aspect of the craft?
Well, in regards to feeling, like you said, renewed after a fellowship like you've been to church, I mean, if I was to not even take, if I was to refer someone, let's look at, say, Psalms 133. In that particular psalm, we're told that brotherhood and unity is basically equating to immortality. So it has to have some kind of reinvigorating kind of aspect.
Okay.
Um, but I think it's just our nature as human beings is to be able to fellowship with people who are like us. It probably does something psychologically, reaffirms us and let us know that while we're on this rock living this mystery, is other people out here. It's not just us that are kind of confused about why we're here and we're trying to find answers to it.
I like that, especially the way you looked at it, like, it's not just us alone on the rock with the craft. There is the powerful analogy of a builder, and any individual could say that it would take one person a long time to do a big thing, but it can take many less time. And likewise, when one falls, another has the ability to pick them up. This is carried all over. This is the power of not, it's just power of fellowship. You don't have to restrict it to fraternity or sorority. It's the collective good, right? Serving a collective good. And when you encounter an aspect of that collective that is in need of refinement, and this is an aspect of self-identification, not necessarily collective identification, but self-identification of this point of refinement. As a Mason, what is the first thing you look to? And then as a magician, what is the first thing that you look to engage with these aspects of self-improvement?
I look at me.
Yeah. Hey.
That's pretty blunt. Be it Freemasonry or the practice of magic, it all starts with us, the individual. We are born into, there's this thing, microcosm versus macrocosm, and we are the microcosm. So we start with ourselves, trying to learn ourselves. A lot of us think that we know ourselves just because we've been with ourselves all our lives. But
That's a good point.
but if you don't take the time to understand why you may be having certain thoughts, to understand why when someone says something you were triggered by that, to understand your own psychology, to understand your resting heart rate, to really know yourself.
Right.
um
Know thyself.
yes, it's not just a cliche, it's real.
Yeah.
Like I could tell you how many locks or dreads I have on my head, what I mean, and the still stuff, like Jesus even went so far as to say you don't even know how many strands of hair on your head. So if you say you know yourself and you have all this hair just on your head and you don't know how many strands you got, then there's still something that you need to know about yourself. So I always start with myself and work my way outward, because if I start outward and work my way inward, I'm starting with someone else's idea of what reality is, and I'm bringing it into me, and now it's foul at that point. It's somebody else's idea, and I try to stay away from that. I try to go with what's heart centered, as what my teacher once told me, because when you go with what's heart centered, it feels good and is often the right way to go.
So how do you delineate in that space? Because I know that there's a lot of different teachings on, you've got your head space, your heart space, and then there's, like your physiology, or your the physicality to you, that, you're an animal that has to eat, sleep, continue as it goes.
Mm.
How do you start to separate the differences between those parts of yourself to focus on that heart?
It kind of naturally happens. I'm gonna say for me,
Mm-hmm.
um, it starts just basically in meditation, or just being able to sit still in silence. I learned this in the Master Key System by Charles Honnell. The
I think I'm
first
familiar. I haven't read it, but it's off the head.
Yeah, it's set like weekly lessons.
Mm-hmm.
These were originally correspondence lessons about achievement, and the subscriber would get one letter a week for, I believe, 22, 24 weeks. But the book's been condensed, so you will have to have discipline and only do one lesson per week. Um, the very first lesson is being able to sit still without moving for at least 15 minutes. And when I first read that, I thought, sounds easy, and it wasn't as easy as I thought.
Surprise.
Being able to sit with yourself,
Yeah.
and then as you start to realize that, for example, you might get a twitch somewhere, and you go into, why did that twitch right there? It just kind of, things just unlock. You become hyper aware of your body.
Mhm.
You can feel in, like Eckhart Tolle says in The Power of Now, you can feel the internal field within yourself. It kind of just, when you're able to just sit and not be distracted, you pick it up naturally.
Mhm.
So to be heart centered, I would say the best way I can describe it is like an influx. And then, like, when people, they say, they have this phrase when people get angry, they say, "Oh, he's tight." You literally feel a tightened sensation in your chest. I used to liken it to when I got into debates with people. It's like whatever they said, it felt like it would be coming right into my chest, like I was sucking it out, and then I would fire it back at them with whatever my retort or my rebuttal would be. That's
Yeah.
how it
Yeah.
feels.
So
Yeah.
that's you've hit on like so many different points, and I'm like, Oh shit. When it comes to that, like again, it's all an individual and self-reflective journey. So getting to hear and see what moves you and what processes you take helps me to draw connections to tell the story and to look at how magic and Freemasonry are inherently rooted in very similar paths, and that's just an organized system.
Mhm.
With what you're talking about, the first thing I considered was I like not going into the degrees, but when you remember degrees, you know that there are points and times where you're left on your own,
Yeah, that's a big part of it.
where you're left. So to anybody who's watching, brethren who are like, there's no such thing as magic and Freemasonry. That's witchcraft. Get that shit out of here. Because I have had Masons say that.
I can't wait until we get into the facts on that, but let's continue on this. We're going, earlier I said something about Hermes, and I want to get back to that.
Oh, we're gonna
But
roll into that one. See that one coming. I'm like, okay, all right, little teaser. Okay, it's hard because there is so much to unpackage here. There's so much to get into and to discuss when it comes to these two forms. Regardless of it's chicken or the egg, which came first. But I mean, to some, right, the craft begins that. That begins the first place where you experience change because it was not change that was motivated by a system outside of you, right?
Mhm.
Church, when we get into it, you realize there's a lot of different systems that motivate it and that move it, and it can polarize you, either one way or another, or you can kind of be unsure because you couldn't engage with it because there were these different forces involved.
Mhm.
And with the magic of Freemasonry, and likewise the magic of experience, all of these things are rooted in you. They're rooted in how you are experiencing them and how you are brought to them. And I'll be honest, every engagement I've ever had with the craft or a brother within the craft, I can take this conversation for precedent,
Mhm.
has been positive, has been not only beneficial, but has been amicable. And like even when debates got heated, like
Mhm.
I've created whole Masonic debate rituals to protect spirited conversations as they go within the craft, because they move you, but it's never never deteriorated my opinion of a brother. It's never like, I've never really had a bad experience in the craft. And even when I did, they were not bad. They were merely learning opportunities. Like I would get really excited, wanted to do a lot, and I wasn't aware of the rules or the systems and blah, blah, blah. And so
Yeah.
looking at the degree, Freemasonry seems remarkably charged at facilitating a personal experience consistently, right? Every brother goes through the same 3 degrees.
Mhm.
It's consistent repetition of, everybody does it a little bit different, but for all intents and purposes, a ritual. And this ritual, it's causing a change in an individual. It's causing a change in you.
Right.
When you look at what systems cause that change, we talked first about the mindfulness, right? Being, moments of introspection, of being quiet.
Mhm.
What do you feel is the hardest aspect of immersing into these experiences?
Oh, the hardest part for me was being able to, I looked at it like learning to see differently. And some people I know have taken offense by that phrase. Particularly, I've seen people who are in the church take exception with the idea of going from darkness to light, because to them it implies that um, Freemasonry is saying just because you have Jesus, you were still in the dark. So they kind of take it personal to them, but that's not exactly
I
what
see
it's
that.
talking about. What it's talking about is being able to see differently, being able to, the hardest part, to transcend you in order to be able to see, because you've been subjected to certain things, and it's an invitation to kind of literally, no, I guess it's literal, to rebuild yourself.
I like
And
that. Yeah.
yeah, that takes a lot of courage. You know, I find that most of the people that I have strong debates with regarding Freemasonry, they're what the Bible will call, they're apostate. They've settled on one idea of what reality is, and they don't want to hear anything else. And that isn't preached anywhere. You're supposed to always be watchfully waiting, because there might be a new development in something. And so I would say that's the hardest part. And it also contributes to the loneliness that one feels going through the journey. You mentioned we spend so much time alone. I've never been on a Native American vision quest, but I often think that it would be something like this when you go through those 3 degrees and really have to come, if you take it seriously and you're
Yeah.
diligent, you come face to face with yourself, and you have to ask yourself, do I like what I am? And
Mhm.
some people just aren't strong enough for that experience, and so they shout sour grapes. But I'm not going to go into that. I digress. But that the hardest part is being able to look at yourself, and if need be, we call it improvement. But how do you improve something? You destroy it and replace it with something else, which is
Bingo.
hard.
That one right there. That's it. So that, because when you especially when we get into the analogy of building, and I know a lot of the appendant bodies, they tell more of that story, which in the Bible of the destruction of the temple.
Mhm.
But I feel like there's people don't necessarily read or take into consideration all of the history which came before the analogy that they like to cling on to or like to focus in. And you look at the destruction of repetitive generations that led to what became the pinnacle of it, and
Mhm.
having to recognize that at times it was done wrong, that the foundation was set wrong, because it was so individually focused, it wasn't collectively focused. All those blocks that were being made, that one was great, that one sucked. No, there was no ability to put them together. There was no harmony that could be created. And so inevitably, anything stacked upon them had to be destroyed, either intentionally or inevitably.
I feel like that's where we are in society today. I feel like that's where we are today. There is that certain apostate quality, that certain um, things are done in a particular way because that's just always how it's been done from time immemorial. And so we're not checking to see if perhaps long held beliefs were flawed, and everything that we've built on that belief is subject to collapse. And I hope we get past it, but just what you were saying, just I felt like that you were talking about today.
And it connects, and that's both a benefit because we can recognize it, right? When we
Mhm.
see similarities, I always feel like those are important. Those are important ones. And in fact, similarities and or correspondence are some of my favorite discussion points, especially when it
Yeah,
comes to magic.
yeah,
Magic, science, they are to me synonymous. And if you enjoy your phone, if you enjoy your technology, then you enjoy the benefits of magic. If you don't
yes,
like that word, then we just need to educate you on what that word means,
yes.
because it's systems of innovation. You talk about psychology, like the ability to just work through past traumas, work through your shadow. You inevitably, it's always coming back to you, and that there is a controlled way and a consistent way to navigate yourself
Mhm.
within the fraternity. How do you think, or what would you describe, or do you think the fraternity offers you a way, or lends you teaching to help you navigate yourself, or to understand yourself?
Absolutely. It's funny that you mentioned that, because as you were leading up to the question, the first thing that popped into my mind was the 7 liberal arts and sciences. Um, I know in this day and age, a lot of people have the benefit of going to college, be it a community college or 4 year college. And so a
Mhm.
liberal arts education is kind of taken for granted.
Right.
It's like, okay, whatever. But when you consider Freemasonry from the 1400s, which could be a controversial date, but there is a document, Masonic document from 1410 that talks about the 7 liberal arts and sciences. So when you consider that time period, to have that education was basically you were practicing magic at that time.
That
Um,
when you look inevitably, especially even just like, and like I'm gonna roll, I'm gonna say, step out of the fraternity a little bit and look at just architects.
mhm.
Those individuals who have somehow figured out how to hold up the heavens
Yeah, yeah.
with the earth and with formed and shaped mountains. This shit to me, like, don't get me wrong, I may be esoterically educated. I've tried to build a house, built a tiny house, did a shitty job. It was not a good time. I have so much to learn. I could never do it in one lifetime. And the fact that my that our forefathers, ever since the beginning of time, have been progressively building
Right.
that temple, building that site, that holy site, that place to dwell where the Holy of Holies dwells, has been, regularly being prepared. It's 100% magic, but it's also 100% ritual. For me, it's an evolving technology. At one point in time, the way you said it, those Masons back in that, they were practicing magic. They could do what nobody else could do.
Yeah, yeah. I guess maybe because they were divided. The people were divided basically into like a guild system. So you had people that did different things, but these people, they were able to basically go to an open area and build this huge edifice. This church or whatever it was that they were building out of thin air. We take these things for granted today.
And they still stand today. That's the shit that blows me away, is because, I know what happens if I don't mow my lawn for a week. Like if I let a tree grow wild for its lifetime, it would upset and tear through the foundations of what I've created. But there are churches and castles and edifices dedicated to deity in some capacity, to geometry. Even just if we want to, you could take the atheistic approach and say they're not dedicated to any divinity, but they are dedicated to sheer resistance of physics. Like, to say that I understand enough about how you as nature work to defy you, to balance and create my own mountain that stands. And the fact that they stand today, but the things that we are building today don't stand today.
Right.
They don't pass the same test. I feel like there's an inherent lesson in our engagement with those technologies that we used to use. They used to be at the core of the progress of man. Right? It seems like our technologies, we've talked before in our last call about, you talked about kind of like that soul-sucking nature that the age of distraction has created.
Yeah.
It feels a lot of times like we are losing connection with those ancestral teachings, those ancestral lessons, those ancestral magics, because we're not taking, like what you described, that mindfulness, that central time to be aware of where they have, like, how they're a part of our foundation.
Yeah, I think it's part of that soul sucking distraction that we're having. When we do work, be it because I know I'm not the only person in the world that has the most horrible customer service experiences, be it through a drive-through, be it to your friendly neighborhood realtor, be it to someone who has volunteered to offer a service in exchange for a rate, be it from a job or they're an entrepreneur. And what I've observed is that people don't have a reverence for what they are doing. They're just doing it to get through it. When you think about the ancient builders, not only did they not have these distractions, but those distractions being absent, they were able to really pour themselves into their work. Their attention was on their work. It's like that invisible element. They say if you focus your attention on plants, you can affect plants. And this has been documented. You can, I recommend the Celestine Prophecy to anybody and the workbook that goes along with it. It's been documented. So this same attention, this same concentrated force goes into our work. So these buildings that they build, these churches or cathedrals, pyramids, whatever, Chicha, what is it, Machu Picchu, all these places, they were totally focused on their work. They were literally putting their energy into it.
It became more than just a physical act. It became a
act of worship.
Boom.
You were doing a service to God by doing this. A few moments ago, you said something along the lines of being able to recognize, and I think you said rebel against you in reference to nature. I don't think we could ever do that. We're a child of nature. And so anything that comes from within us, I think if we actually focus on what we're doing, instead of just throwing houses up in order to make money, we think about how the ecology is affected. And I'm not even talking about, green things. This is
Hmm.
this is something like an NLP you consider before you implement something. You think about how it affects the ecology, your family, the neighborhood, XYZ. If
Hmm.
we did those kind of things with our work and be content when it's over and go and do other things, you don't need a billion burger restaurants in the world.
Right.
You get so many burger restaurants and go on to do something else. You don't need to come out with the same shoe every year.
Embracing diversity and allowing it to take its own path rather than trying to take all these different divergent paths and just shove them into one.
Yeah, and they're doing it in order to, of course, capitalism make money. I don't have nothing against capitalism. It's in
Right.
communism too. Wherever you're going to exploit people for resources, it's in
I
those.
mean, there's an exchange everywhere. You mentioned that a bit.
Yeah, but it seems that the people themselves aren't valued enough, and because I'm not sure if it's because the people don't value themselves enough, or that they're born into a system that hasn't taught them to value themselves that much. I'm not sure which one it is at this point,
So
but
that's unique. And I want to just circle that. We can come back to. I don't want to interrupt. But just like to value your system, a system that values you, because I think there's a line there between magic and systems of magic, as typically documented, and Freemasonry.
oh, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, systems in general. I think you thoroughly summed it up when you talk about systems, because you can't have a system without magic, or vice versa, I believe. Wherever you create a system, there's going to be magic involved.
The way you describe that, how we can't really, or like how inherently, if we are operating with that true intensity, nothing we do or nothing that emanates from us will be
Out of nature or out of
right.
balance.
Yeah, it won't be out of bounds. I think there's a fine line in that, though, when it comes to when you look at like you can build something in like in an affluent like middle finger to nature, and
Hmm.
then you can build something which is like modeling nature. So we
Hmm.
could take and make a pathogen, can make a virus. You could take and twist the biology of something, and it is still 100% natural. It is
Hmm.
bound by a system which is far greater than we could ever fuck up.
Hmm.
But it didn't follow what would be those honorable principles as observed in nature. When you look at the way that things evolve over time, they don't evolve in a drastic way. They grow. We don't. When you look at how nature does and operates, using that as the constant, right? So when I say magic, these are not things that any man wrote or has written. These are observed principles in nature for me
Right. Hmm.
that have held consistent. Now, man has described them and written about them since the beginning,
Hmm.
trying to encapsulate what these are, these constants, these things that they could take and pass on to another one, and they could do or have the same thing. If I say, like, think about even the development of words and language. If there wasn't some consistency, if there wasn't some universal form that everyone was referencing or acting or pulling off of, then inevitably, like the Tower of Babel, I enjoyed that aspect of your series on TikTok, um, because there is so much misconceptions around that analogy
Hmm.
and around how it in the lessons which it not pulls from. I think the mysteries which it is trying to convey and how it is oftentimes taken.
Yeah. 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 I mean, I can't speak for anybody else, but I think this has been going on a long time. I'm not saying that there's anything innately wrong with this, but generally it goes like you're born. At some point, you're told to differentiate between good and bad. Then you're given a Bible, and it tells you that you got to do all of these things. Well, let's just say it doesn't. It doesn't tell you that. People tell you. It doesn't say anything. It can't talk. It doesn't. The Bible don't say nothing. It doesn't say anything. Let's just say that. But people tell you that it says things, and that in order to stay on one line, you try to stay away from the ostensible enemies of God, like Nimrod. You try to stay away from Cain. You try to stay away definitely from Lucifer and Satan. You gotta stay away from Egypt. Can't be like the Egyptians or the
Mm-mm.
Philistines or Philistines.
Don't look
You
at a
know,
statue.
yeah. So, we kind of get this superfluous understanding of the religion, and it's not really, I think. given to us to enrich us, but to make us better workers and being able to cope with the reality of having to live, having to work just to live on the planet that you didn't ask to be born onto. So I think,
Hey, fucking men to that.
um, so I think there's nothing innately wrong with that, but it goes back to the idea of, the Bible also talks about silence and circumspection, taking time to sit with yourself and see if the understanding that you were told is actually correct. I think Freemasonry, when it burst onto the scene in 1717, they say, was right at the end of the age of darkness. The age of enlightenment was, they say, around 1715. 2 years later, Freemasonry came. So before that, people were being essentially manufactured to pay tribute to a monarch, and they weren't allowed to read and write or do things of that nature. And then, boom, enlightenment comes, and then you have this organization that says, no, you can read, you can learn about the stars, you can learn how to plant, because what we're doing is not magic. This is basic stuff. This is liberal arts.
So when we talk about that, right, because a lot of times people like to delineate that, they think that, so because those seven liberal arts and sciences, I think they heavily encapsulate those to me, the seven liberal arts and sciences are the fraternity's way of guiding you to what I describe, or what are written as the Hermetic principles. So here's I mean, you take those seven universal truths as they're encapsulated. Every one of the seven liberal arts and sciences, if you, in my opinion, if you follow that, it will take you to one of those truths, to a level of mastery. And the fact that your entered apprentice degree in traditional times took 7 years. It was a 7-year service of indentured work.
Right.
And in that time, you didn't even begin to engage out of any level of external study, literally, or not, not the right word. You chipped rocks. You kept it simple, right? You did basic, you were not entrusted to nothing. You proved that you could hit and hit consistently, right? It's like it's very basic, but it's very simple. When you look at the basic aspects of any technological use, if you start to fail, if you start to lose what is the base drive of it, you don't know what you're doing. You lose control of the work that you are creating. Let's talk about I'll pick on you since I have you here. You are a prolific creator on TikTok, and I have spent actual hours going through your content, watching and viewing. And on a level, I'm always sad because I can't find the things that I find. I'll find them, and then I can swipe up, and then I can't find them again. There is such valuable content, but it's hard to navigate. And I would look at this because TikTok is not connected to the foundation of what you're doing, right? Which is creating, you're creating content. TikTok controls that. They control who sees it, where it goes, what happens to it. Not in regards to we don't have an easy ability on TikTok to organize, sort, label, and refresh our content, refresh our information. But it's all so valuable, and the only way that you can get it is if the currents of TikTok catch it. So it's there's information that when you are connected deeply to the root of it, and I'm not saying because you have the information you create, it's not on there for you, it's on there for other people. That's experience that other people take and pull from, so you don't need to organize it. But it being unwillingly organized at the will of the TikTok algorithm.
Which is in itself is magic. Sometimes I wonder, when I first came on to TikTok in December of last year, I posted a duet with someone who was talking about Baphomet, and that thing went viral, had 145,000 views and such, and everything else has been bone dry. So I'm like, what exactly does that algorithm measure? I'm not sure. but most of, if not all of what I do on TikTok is on the fly. So
Hmm.
people will see people on TikTok. They have looks like production, to be honest. They've thought out what they're going to do. Most of my TikToks are like, you know what would be good to say, and I just grab my phone and I go for
And boom, and
it.
it rolls into it.
You know, even with the series, I didn't want to even make a series. I just was like, I wanted to do something that had a background. I hadn't done that yet, and then
Hmm.
I did one, and I did another, and then apparently people liked it. So I'm gonna continue with that. I actually had some things in the making for that, but in terms of foundational, yeah, TikTok is going to be one of those distraction things anyway. I would much rather sit in a place with people and have these discussions face to face. But things being what they are, it's an expedient way to get messages out, um, as popular as it is.
But there's a magic to it. I'll definitely like, I think there's something to it, right? But this is even something, again, I can roll this right back into a conversation about magic within Freemasonry.
Hmm.
In 1717, like you described, this was right 2 years after that age of enlightenment. We kicked into this rampant love of education and furtherment of the mind.
Yeah.
And it was viral. It was
Mhm.
it was 100% viral. It took at the time the country, but later the world by storm. This idea, because you can even roll forward into the revolution, um, and
Can I just
what.
say that a lot of what the Freemasons did during that time, meaning in terms of basically opening up education, college level education, basically for free. Let's
Mhm,
just say that the seven liberal arts and sciences in 1717 would be like having a degree, uh,
100%, 100%.
master's degree, if you would. And so we have to understand the dynamic at the time. The church, and when I say the church, people take it personally. Did my camera go out?
I think I just re-triggered it. I want to see, boom, you're moving
Oh,
again. So
okay.
there will be we were locked face. So I was like, maybe I can just re-click it. My bad. I apologize. I thought I was gonna be a little slick.
No problem. No problem. I want to say that when I say the church, I mean historically the church, meaning when people say the church, we're talking about the Roman Catholic Church, not your neighborhood Baptist church, not your missionary Baptist church. These are all spin-offs of the Roman Catholic Church.
We're talking about the big boy.
Yeah, yeah, Holy Roman Empire. So the church had a foothold on everything in the world leading up to that. And so when Freemasonry came about, basically allowing people to educate themselves and become better than what they were, and then in turn, they were educating their families and their peer circles. The Catholic Church started to see their power slip away. And then
Mhm.
shortly after that, maybe about 100 years, we started getting all this anti-Masonic rhetoric, directly from the church and indirectly.
Yeah.
So I think we ought to keep that in mind, because I often say some of the biggest magicians in the world is the church.
Hey,
It's them.
yes, yeah, you said that last time, and I'm like, yeah, they're canonized saints.
Yes.
These are the motherfuckers who built, I mean, who literally exemplified
Mhm.
magical principality
Mhm.
over themselves. So you can even take saints, and the saint's extra patient. The saint is extra studious. This one is, very charitable. All
Mhm.
of these things, which inherently they caused change within the world because they were devout and they believed in something. What's interesting is, think about this. So again, going back to you Masons who are watching, who again are resistant to this idea of magic. What I want to roll into is looking back at the story that Sol has told, this historical recollection that is very important.
Mhm.
The craft has always been an innovator of technologies,
Yeah.
an innovator of systems. In ancient times, when we were operative, we used the compass, we used all of the tools which you know so well to construct and create edifices which again stand today. And traditionally, we did this in the name of God, which ran alongside the church. But
Mhm.
when we started to move and separate outside of the control of the church and to believe in the individual church, the individual connection to the right of to elevating yourself, to constructing this proper edifice, it
Mhm.
created a resistance. It created a confliction between bodies of control. It was I
Yeah.
control myself or this big body controls me. And as that control started to shift, the big body seized control. That Roman Catholic Church, the author of the Bible, for the most part, that sits on most of our altars when we're looking at, they started on a level, a kind of smear campaign against Freemasonry.
Yeah, a big smear campaign.
Yeah, huge. I
Um,
mean, like not little, but like
yeah, yeah, it was not a small thing. When we're talking about after 100 years when Freemasonry came into existence, now we're talking about the Roman Catholic Church having in France a magazine strictly dedicated to smearing
shit.
Freemasons.
I seen that. I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah, we also have the employment of a man named Leo Taxel. Now, Leo Taxel, he grew up as a Jesuit. He was raised by the church. He was, the story goes that his biggest thing was pornography. He liked writing pornographic tales, and he didn't really like what the church was about, so he rebelled. And during the course of his life, he went and became a Freemason. He got his first degree, and I'm not sure exactly what Leo did, but by the next year, he was expelled from Freemasonry. So he falls off the scene for about 4 years, and then he goes and converts to Catholicism. The Pope at the time, I want to say, was Pope Leo the 13th. I think he was the Pope. He had an audience with Leo Taxel, and out of that meeting came all of the misquotes about Albert Pike, for example, the Luciferian quotes. That's Leo Taxel. That's the Leo Taxel hoax. And then afterwards, after this was going for years, Leo Taxel, he called the equivalent of a press conference, and it was packed, and he told everybody it was a hoax. In fact, you have to get a book that's called "Is It True What They Say About Freemasonry" by Arturo de Reyes. If you ever watch any of Discovery things about, Discovery Channel things about Freemasons, he's in there. He's a part of, the Supreme Council in DC. So if you read that book and then do the historical cross reference, don't take his word for it, go and look for it. You'll see that a fight broke out when he announced it because the church had so much vested in this being true. And then when he said no, it was just his way of giving them one last middle finger on the way out the door. So the
Oh, I
church
had no
itself,
idea.
it's a hilarious story. I'm trying to tell you. When I first read it, I was thinking, that to have been there, I wish I could have been there because, you're talking about clergymen. They got to fist fighting in the front row when he announced that the whole thing was a
Was it
hoax. Yeah.
this guy? Oh my God.
But
That's
people still hold on to it. Those little chick pamphlets, they grabbed a hold to it and then they started passing out tracts and saying, Albert Pike, blah, blah, blah. People are still regurgitating this myth over 100 years after it's been debunked.
yeah,
That's the
unfortunately,
crazy.
misinformation is fucking, I mean, it's prolific and it is difficult to say something that can be proven true always. It is not hard to say something that would be difficult to prove true.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so we get into this challenge point, and I can always, I get the ancient, traditions. What drove a lot of Freemasons into lodge is that I would say that era of secrecy where we start to get quiet, where we start to, I understand it when you talk about the level of misinformation at a time where, I'll be honest, our culture was rather violent when they didn't like something.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
there's a level now where we're very, like, I'm not saying that we live in a PC world, but there's a difference in how you can engage with people today
Them bad
versus
things.
how you can back then. Like somebody getting lynched back then it happened. And
hmm
oftentimes it happened.
hmm
Today, it's very different. And
hmm
so we're coming back into an age where there's a level of protection and being able to speak and to defend on a level what you hold true.
Yeah.
So when we look at magic,
hmm
when you take the fraternity, what is the most magical thing you have experienced within the fraternity?
Really, I'm gonna go back to it again. The seven liberal arts and sciences were really the most magical thing for me personally. Just the way it was presented,
Hmm.
um, more or less being the most effective things to polish the mind that man has ever had been given. Not man didn't create these things, man was given these things. And on the surface, going through high school, you think you know about these things already until you
You
really
do.
get into the definitions of what grammar is and rhetoric. See, that's a tricky one, right? Rhetoric is a tricky one because they say seven liberal arts and sciences, but rhetoric itself has five parts. you know, so all of a sudden, next thing you know, you're reading about ancient Greece and Rome, and then their thought processes and how
You
they.
realize that this is the ancient schools. Or actually, it's funny because the those seven liberal arts and sciences.
Mhm.
The reason they're in school is because of the fraternity. Like the systems which created the authoritative bodies had free Masonic influence to drive, because you talked about that free college, those free educations. The
Mhm.
minds which fostered the educational bodies were supported by the free education which had been created by Freemasons in the beginning of the country. Like
Exactly.
it just
Now, do you know what, according to Masonic legend, do you know? I'm sorry. Is it all right if I smoke a cigarette?
no, go for it. Light up. Light
Uh,
up. Welcome to Smoke Lounge. Just how it goes.
the history or the lore around where the seven liberal arts and sciences comes from into modern times, I find highly interesting. Um, um,
No, yeah, it's to educate because I'm not so my mind connected. I'm always trying to draw the lines back from like Thoth,
mhm.
those ancient teachings somehow like, connecting these different systems and no educate me.
Yeah, so Thoth we know is also represented as Hermes, right?
Hmm.
In Greek culture, Hermes.
Hmm.
And here's what I found. Now, are you familiar with the several charges of Freemasonry? If not, you can go to the.
I know of them. I will do my lodge to dishonor to not be able to like, but yes, I am aware of them.
Okay, so there's so many, right? I mean, so many. So only certain ones really get notoriety in the Masonic world, which is like the Halliwell poem and the Cook Manuscript. Those are the ones that are really just talked about a whole lot.
Hmm.
But if we were to go back now, keep in mind Freemasonry, we're told in its present form came in 1717.
Right.
However, and I'm sorry, I actually just pulled it up here. It's a few of them. So there's a charge, and you may have heard this one. It's called the Cook Manuscript. It's from the year 1410.
Yeah,
It's from
that one I'm
the
familiar with.
so in the Cook Manuscript. Let me see. Okay. So there's a paragraph that talks about Noah's flood, the flood. And I'm gonna just read that part. And this is going to be a recurring theme through the charges. It says, there were Noah and his wife, and his three sons and their wives, from which sons of all the world is descended. They were named in this manner: Shem, Ham, and Japheth. This flood is called Noah's flood because he and his children were saved in it. Many years after the flood, according to the Chronicle, these two pillars, the pillars being how the seven liberal arts and sciences got to us in the current day. Many years after the flood, according to the Chronicles, these two pillars were found, and the polychron icon, which is just what? Many ages history of many ages, says that the great clerk named Pythagoras found one, and Hermes, the philosopher, found the other, and they taught the sciences that they found written in them. Those sciences were: the first was called grammar, the second, this is 1410, the second, rhetoric, the third is dialectic or the art of logic, the fourth is arithmetic, the fifth is geometry, the sixth is music, and the seventh is astronomy.
Shit.
Oh, okay, wait. Hold what you got. So in the year 1535, because maybe that was a fluke, right? Maybe that was a fluke. In the year
He says maybe.
1535, there was the William Watson manuscript that has a reference to Hermes. First, in true form like the other one. It gives the seven liberal arts and sciences ad honorem, I guess that's Latin, to its honor. The first is called the foundation sciences, grammar. The second, rhetoric. The third, logic. The fourth, arithmetic, etc., etc., etc. This is 1535. And then it says, many years after, as the chronicle tells us, these two pillars and the polychron icon says that a great clerk whom men call Pythagoras found one, and Hermes, the philosopher, found the other, and they taught the sciences that they found written on them. Now, this goes on. Let's go to one more in the 50, because I don't want to take up all your time. But
no, God, no. At this point, I'm like, I mean, 1-3 is the lucky number. I'm like, shit.
So now we have in the year 1583, it's called the Grand Lodge Manuscript #1. Now, all of these are at the British Museum for anybody that wants to go and look at them physically. In 1583, the text starts, okay, the might of the Father of heaven and the wisdom of the glorious Son, S-O-N, talking about Jesus Christ, through the grace of God and the goodness of the Holy Ghost, that are three persons in one God, be with us at our beginning and give us grace so to govern us here in this life, that we may come to his blessing that never shall have an ending. Amen. And then it talks about, good brethren, here are the seven liberal arts and sciences: grammar, rhetoric, dialectic, which is logic, arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy. And then it says down here, you go down further, it gives the great Hermerenes, or Hermes, who is Cush's son, who is Shem's son, who was Noah's son. This same Hermes, who was later called Hermes, the father of wisdom, found one of the two pillars, and the sciences were written on it. This is the year 1583.
So that's fucking cool. That's crazy.
So magic is literally encoded in Freemasonry.
See, I know that. Okay, so let's roll back into, I'm obsessed with Atlantis and these ancient, the theoretical, allegorical, Platonic city, right? In Atlantis, right? There was always this conception that, I'll build on the analogy of the pillar, right? This was a city that was suspended, or it was supported, and there were effectively, there were multiple systems of support within it. And when they broke from those inherent teachings, the epitome of the city collapsed. And the integrity. So again, we know we can take the two pillars in the craft as they are today. They represent a lot of power to any individual. They tell you what you need for support, to support anything. Strength, plenty. In these spaces, you have this adherence to, again, like not necessarily a code of ethics, but to a system of morality, to a system, where this is, some people, it gets deified, it gets turned into a religion, but you have an importance of this connection. In Freemasonry, when you talk about these 7 principles being connected to these two pillars, Thoth in the Emerald Tablets was said to have escaped the flood waters, to have escaped the sinking of the city with basically a series of treasures from it. They weren't just things that he possessed, but they were actual physical things. And so the fact that you talk about Thoth, who's syncretized with Hermes Trismegistus, the Hermes thrice great, Hermes the wielder of wisdom, in possession of one of the pillars. What I think is really interesting and fascinating is the division point. And there's two: Pythagoras and Hermes. There's this. Again, two pillars. There's two marks. There's two lines there. Okay, so I'm gonna throw it there.
Yeah.
All right. So one, I will not take up any more of your time beyond what is absolutely necessary, though I hope you know, I would continue this in great length.
Oh yeah, having a good time.
When you take your experience within the fraternity,
Hmm.
what allowed you to connect with it in, I would say, that magical way? When we talked about it a bit, like, you know, what could we give to Masons? You're like, I don't believe you. I don't want, you know, like you're saying Freemasons, like, no, let's, if we were going to give, you know, not a rite or a ritual or a spell, but if we were going to give a test, just a mental exercise that a Mason could take into their lodge the next time they go, they either witness a degree, they go just attend business. What's something that they could do to engage or maybe connect with that moving aspect of the magic in the craft?
Well, the magic in the craft, I think one of them, we'll go back to Hermes or Thoth, at least the ibis-headed writing. Writing was a system that he created, right?
Mm-hmm.
He created writing, talking, everything under the sun, right? And so we're given this idea in Freemasonry that you can write something down and then fulfill what you wrote down. That's
Okay. Yeah.
fundamentally the most magical experience that one can have. Writing something down where it's just a thought in your head and then striving to bring it into three-dimensional reality. That's, to me, that's the most magical thing that you can do. Now, if you want to relate it to the ritualistic work itself, my experience, I don't know if I mentioned it, when I got my first degree 20 years ago in June, that I was initiated into Carrollton Lodge number 57 that works under the Most Worshipful Prince Hall Grand Lodge of Georgia. I had a round trip commute of 120 miles every day to and from work. And so I was on my way home from work, and I had a blowout on the freeway off of I-20 right past, anyone familiar with the area, right past Post Road. Had a blowout. And as that blowout occurred, I began to panic. Like, in my mind, I had a certain amount of time that I needed to drop off my family at home before I was due to be at the lodge.
Mm-hmm.
And it did not account for a blowout.
And it did not count.
Account for that. So I'm beginning to panic because a lot of people would think that it's a dangerous thing, and it can be, but a blowout, I mean, by the time that had happened, I had already had like 8 or 9, because at that time it seemed like it was a lot of nails in the road. So I already knew how to navigate it. I wasn't worried for my family. So we got to the side of the road, and as I was pulling over, I noticed behind me a car right behind me was pulling at the same time. I thought it was the police at first, and it wasn't the police. It was a salesman. He got out of his car. He had literally a three-piece suit and black shades, and he came up to my window. I hadn't realized what was going on because
I bet you that was great.
yeah. So my wife at the time, she looked and she was like, "Who's that at the window?" I'm not even initiated yet. I'm on my way to be. So I looked through the glass and there's a man hunched down with his shades on. I rolled down the window. That's how long ago we still were rolling down windows. And I looked out and he looked in. He took his glasses down. He's like, "You need some help? I saw what's going on." I was like, "Yeah, I do, but I didn't have a jack. I just used the spare. I didn't have any of that."
Yeah.
Went to his car, got his spare, and this man in his three-piece suit pulled out the most elaborate toolkit I'd ever seen. Apparently, that's what he sold for a living.
No shit.
He was a salesman who sold tools. He sold tools. In retrospect, that's funny. He sold tools for a living. And he changed my tire. He never unbuttoned his suit. He never undid his, just in full dress, changed my tire, gave me his card, and I went about my way. I later called him after the experience, and he tried to sell me the tool set, which I wanted to buy, but it was out of my price range. But that was a magical experience for me. I often go back and I reflect on that because when we think
Wow.
about being conducted, when we think about the idea of follow your conductor and fear no danger,
I love that line. I love
yeah,
that line.
it's a force bigger than us that is already guiding us along a path. You know what I mean? All we gotta do is decide what path we want to get on. And there's forces there that are there to help you already, you know. So
So that's remarkable, especially, and again, I'm going to last connection of what Soul said to the craft. Brethren, if you remember in your second degree, you were taken on a particular path. Follow your conductor and fear no danger. There is a path set before, and it has a unique direction, indication, and level of elevation. There's a reason to those steps, and there's a reason that they're there for you to take. I think that's incredible. I love it. I hear that. I'm like, yeah, that's awesome. Those are the polarizing experiences within the fraternity that take, and I would say that they make Masonic magicians. They are those magical wielders. Because to be honest, like, I'm a magical wielder, but I've also was like that before. I was motivated by the positive principles of the fraternity. I had no issue engaging in what I would call nefarious art or work. And while the hindsight that I could have never engaged in any collective working against myself or against another, that didn't come till later. But at the time, right, I like in the craft, I believe that everything I do is empowered and emboldened. My prayers to God are strengthened by the motivations. They're strengthened by those ideals. And those are often ideals which are supported, encircled by the time I've spent within the fraternity. So I would pass that. I pass that to you, and likewise, that is. So thank you for that. Holy hell, I love that. I think that's a powerful point to conclude that. Is there anything you'd like to leave our viewers, our listeners with?
not in particular. I mean, I want to thank you for the opportunity to come and discuss, like yourself, two topics that are dear to me personally. If anyone that is on a magical journey, I just want to say everyone is on a magical journey. Decide where it is that you want to go and go. It really is that simple. The magic part is going to be navigating what obstacles may come about, but just understand, see yourself there, and just go.
And just go. It's that simple. It's not complicated. You don't have to sacrifice a goat, though. If you've got one, I know a guy. So bless you, brother. It is a pleasure. I look forward to the next opportunity. I can steal some more of your time to continue this conversation. I wish you the best and blessing. Likewise, everybody. If you're curious, if you want something entertaining, educating, and esoterically informing, go check out SolMagick over on TikTok or Instagram. Be well, my brother.
Take care.